All right, let's talk about the carbon cycle. It's this invisible engine that basically runs our entire planet. But how well do you really get it? Today, we're not just going to explain it, we're going to put our knowledge to the test. So welcome to the Carbon Cycle Challenge.
You look at this image and you see it right away. On one side, you've got the ancient rhythm of the wild, and on the other, the constant hum of our modern world. These two things share one planet. And this picture, it just gets right to the heart of the matter. How do we even begin to measure our impact on the systems that keep us all alive?
So, I gotta ask, could you pass the test? Seriously, if you had to explain where all the carbon in the air goes and where it all comes from, could you do it? Well, let's find out.
Okay, let's dive in. We are going to deconstruct a real question from the AP Environmental Science exam. By breaking down exactly what the experts are looking for in an answer, we're going to build a really solid understanding of the carbon cycle right from the ground up.
First up, carbon's great exchange. You can almost think of the Earth as a living thing. It breathes. And this first part of our challenge is all about understanding that breath, the biological processes that pull carbon out of the atmosphere and then put it right back in. So, the number one way carbon gets pulled out of the atmosphere is a process we all learned about in school: photosynthesis. Plants are absolute masters at this. They're basically the planet's lungs. They literally inhale CO2 and use the power of sunlight to turn it into the organic stuff that fuels pretty much all life on Earth.
It really just breaks down into three simple steps you see here: absorb, convert, and fix. Now that last step, fix, that is the most important part. Photosynthesis takes carbon as a gas and locks it into a solid, stable, life-giving form. It's basically alchemy, powered by the sun.
But it's a two-way street. The carbon cycle is this incredibly delicate balancing act. So for every process like photosynthesis that's taking carbon out of the atmosphere, there are other processes on the other side of the scale putting it right back.
And these things are happening all around us, all the time. Actually, even inside of us. That breath you just took, that's respiration, releasing CO2. A log slowly rotting in the forest, that's decomposition, releasing carbon. Even a cow's burp is part of the cycle, releasing methane. It's all just carbon making its return trip right back into the atmosphere.
All right, Section 2, Earth's carbon vaults. See, not all carbon is constantly on the move. Huge amounts of it get locked away for centuries, sometimes even millennia, in these massive natural reservoirs. So the next part of our challenge is to figure out what these giant carbon vaults are.
The biggest carbon vault, by far, is the ocean. It soaks up CO2 directly from the air. But the really amazing part is what happens next. Trillions of tiny organisms use that carbon to build their bodies and their shells, and when they die, they sink, creating this slow, constant shower of carbon that falls to the deep ocean floor. This process is called the biological pump, and it's constantly pulling carbon out of the active cycle and putting it into long-term storage.
So yeah, the ocean is a massive player. But what about on land? Now, we all know about fossil fuels, but the exam specifically asks for other long-term storage vaults. So where else does carbon get locked away?
And the answers are all around us, and they're deep beneath our feet. We're talking about the carbon that's locked away in ancient forests, in the very rock that makes up mountains, the stuff that's trapped in polar ice, and what's held in the rich soils of peat bogs. These aren't just sinks, they're more like carbon time capsules, holding the breath of ancient worlds.
For thousands and thousands of years, this cycle had a natural rhythm. But then, a new force came into the picture: us. Our activities have started to mess with that ancient balance, which brings us to the next, and really critical, part of our challenge.
The question is pretty sharp. We all know that burning fossil fuels is the main driver, but it wants to know what else we're doing. What are two other major ways that human activity adds carbon to the atmosphere?
A huge one is how we use land. Deforestation, for instance, delivers this one-two punch. First, we lose the trees that were actively pulling carbon out of the air. But second, when we burn that forest or just let it rot, all the carbon that was stored in those trees goes right back into the atmosphere. Same thing happens when we plow up old grasslands and soils. It just unlocks carbon that's been stored for centuries.
And it's not just about land use. Think about all our waste piling up in landfills producing methane gas, or the massive global herds of livestock whose digestive systems release huge amounts of greenhouse gases. Even something like making cement for our cities, that process releases CO2 as a chemical byproduct. These are the sort of hidden fingerprints of our modern world.
So we've tilted the balance. We're adding more carbon to the atmosphere. The big question is, so what?
what actually happens when you change the fundamental chemistry of the planet. This section is all about those ripple effects.
And the consequences, well, they're profound. This table shows some of the direct links. Let's just focus on that last one for a second. Ocean acidification. When more CO2 dissolves in the ocean, it changes the water's chemistry. It makes it more acidic. Now, this isn't a small thing. It can literally dissolve the shells of tiny creatures at the very base of the ocean food web, which can cause the entire system to just start unraveling.
Okay, for our final section, the challenge asks us to think a little outside the box. To really get why the carbon cycle is so unique, we need to compare it to another element that's critical for life. It's kind of a tale of two elements, carbon versus phosphorus.
And here is the fundamental difference. You can think of it this way. Carbon can fly. It exists as a gas in the atmosphere, so it can cycle all over the globe, and pretty quickly. Phosphorus, on the other hand, is grounded. It's locked up in rocks and soil, which makes its cycle incredibly slow and very localized.
So why does that matter? Because phosphorus is absolutely essential. It's a core component of our DNA. It creates the membranes around every single one of our cells. It's literally what makes our bones and teeth strong. Life simply cannot exist without it, which makes its slow, grounded nature a huge limiting factor for ecosystems all over the world.
So we've gone from the single breath of a plant all the way to our global industrial system. These massive cycles, they aren't just diagrams in a textbook. They're woven into every single thing we do. We started with that picture of two worlds, nature and civilization trying to coexist. So the final question, it isn't just for a test, it's for all of us. In that great balancing act, what fingerprint are you leaving on the scale?